All right, let's finish my instrument training flight that we started last week and try to squeeze in another big, fat Beyond the Checkride segment where we'll dive into fueling our own airplanes at self-service pumps. Enjoy today's episode of the Student Pilot Cast. Tanks for the memories, how not to make fuelish mistakes.
Chandler Tower, Cherokee 4121 Tango's at Chandler Air Service. We have Zulu and we'd like a south departure, please.
What does it take to be an angel?
Welcome back, SPC listeners, and I'm sorry about the puns. I can't help it. Anyway, we're back with the conclusion of my first training flight under the hood in quite a while. I'll try to be quick on the commentary and the in-cockpit audio on this one because we've got a pretty big Beyond the Checkride segment that I want to make sure that we have time for and that we squeeze in here. Before we get going on that, though, there were a couple of things I promised to at least touch on this week. I'll hopefully go into detail at some point in the future, but I mentioned last week when I was talking about my son working at APS that he'd likely be getting a pretty fun ride in an airplane here pretty soon. Well, I had one recently too, and I mentioned that briefly. So let me step out of sequence here a little bit in my training and get you up to date. As you may know, I'm currently working on my CFI training right now. Mostly just waiting on getting a DPE scheduled, but still learning, studying, and flying and trying to be ready when it does get scheduled. So if you don't know, you have to get a spin endorsement to be a candidate for the CFI check ride. So I decided to do it in style. I went back to where it all began for me, Chandler Air Service, and did my spin training with a great instructor there who's been doing crazy fun stuff in airplanes for decades. I had never even taken a plane upside down before, so I knew this was going to be a treat. And one of the best parts of the whole thing was that I did the flying part of the training in an open cockpit aerobatic biplane. What a freaking rush. We did a fair amount of ground training before getting in the airplane, probably a couple of hours worth, and then hopped in a Great Lakes biplane to do the actual spins. The nature of that cockpit, especially with the parachutes we were wearing, it felt more like we were wearing the airplane than sitting in it, but what a great experience. I got 1.1 of dual in that biplane that day, and probably did more than a dozen spins of all kinds. Went upside down, did spin reversals, accelerated spins, you name it. By the end, though, I was spent. And my stomach was starting to get a little angry with me as I wasn't used to those types of movements. And as I recall, I didn't realize the training was going to be that long. We got a little bit of a late start because he had another lesson that he was finishing up beforehand. And I ended up not eating all morning. And by the time we were done with the flight, it was afternoon. And that probably wasn't smart. I didn't do it on purpose. I just thought, oh, I'll be there for a couple of hours and then I'll grab some food. And anyway, it didn't work out. My stomach was getting mad at me. When we were on our way back in from the flight, he asked if I wanted to do some mild aerobatics. And while my stomach and head were saying, no way, I found myself saying, well, yeah, of course. So how do you pass up a chance like that, right? I did fine. No dog bag needed that day, but I was still glad I had one there just in case. You know what I mean? Anyway, I actually learned a great deal and had a ton of fun, despite it being really pretty hot. The open cockpit helped keep things a little cooler. Even, I think we were starting most of our maneuvers at about 5,500 MSL. The reason I don't recall for sure is because we had set our altimeter for AGL. We had set it to ground level, so we'd always see how far above the deck we were. So I think it was somewhere around 5,500 that we were starting all the maneuvers. So it helped a little bit to be up higher like that. And luckily it was slightly cooler than it had been lately for that particular day I flew, especially because we weren't flying until, noon. But cooler for Arizona in the summer is still blasted hot. Anyway, I just wanted to bring you up to speed a bit on what I'd been doing and that ride I had, and hopefully I'll do a more in-depth recount of that training and the flight in a future episode of the podcast. I did record the flight, but being an open cockpit and all, the audio is not quite as clean as I normally get. But that's all right. It's still usable, and I'll share what I can coming up at some point in the podcast. So let's get on to the end of my instrument training flight way back in sequence. If you remember, I was doing instrument patterns in the sky when we left off last week, so we'll pick it up there again. As usual, I'll edit the audio in the cockpit for blank space and brevity and just jump in to comment where necessary. The last half of this flight should go pretty quickly. Remember, this is February in the Phoenix Valley, so absolutely beautiful weather. So I started talking about how I felt like I was missing the view from the cockpit on such a nice day, and Eddie reminded me that this was just the beginning, and that I'd be itching to be able to see outside long before I finished my instrument training.
South practice, Red Rock 60, 4,500 over the north test track. Southbound.
It's too bad, though. I love the view from the cockpit on nice days.
Yeah.
I don't get to enjoy it.
You, honestly, at the end of instrument, you're actually going to be excited for a commercial because you're going to be able to look outside.
Good point.
I was really bummed out after. I mean, it was great, but not being able to look outside gets annoying.
5,000.
All right, 30 seconds to my right 180.
There you go. Traffic is all no factor now, which is perfect.
Thank you. Honestly, I'm using this primarily for big because that's throwing me off.
So this is not your primary instrument, this is not your supporting.
Yeah. Might as well make that in op.
So control, so that's the other form of instrument flying is your primary supporting method of instruments.
South pressure 2621, rover jump straight shift 4,500, head southeast.
All right, here's our 1 minute standard rate turn. Back pressure.
Southwest pressure, 340 over the Santa America, 4,500 climbing to 6,000, and to left off of way.
Weird, it turned faster than expected. By 4 or 5 seconds. Must have been.
That is weird.
It must have been too high at some point. On the rate of turn, I mean.
No, it's a little bit, but you're fine. Still look pretty good. Trying to find a timer on here so you don't have to use your phone.
I need another kneeboard for my phone.
Yeah, for real. I'm going to figure that out for us on the next flight. Yep, watch your altitude.
I got fixated for a second.
Yep, fixation and omission. It's true. What kills pilots?
Struggle is real.
The struggle is very, very real. All right, so you're heading on this for 2 minutes?
2 minutes. We're 43 seconds into it.
And Red Rock, 1,600 feet above us.
What's that?
Ryan and Jacqueline are about 1,600 feet above us.
Got some company traffic, huh?
Yep. They're ripping.
I mean, not like us on the scooters this morning.
Oh, no, not like us. No, they could never.
All right, so let me explain that for a second. I think I had mentioned before that there was work being done on the hangar and tie-down areas for the flight school. In fact, they were moving locations, and prep was being done on the new place. So the airplanes were homeless for a bit. So for a couple of months, or maybe it was only a few weeks, it's hard to remember, they were being parked out on the flight line in front of the tower, about a 10-minute walk from the school. I think in a previous episode, you heard a controller ask about our walk out there. Well, sometimes instead of hoofing it, we'd get on the golf cart if it was available, or on some occasions, we grabbed some electric scooters that they had in the hangar there, if they were charged and if they were available. And that's what we had done that morning, and we had some fun getting out to the plane. That's why the reference to us ripping around the airport on those scooters. So now you know. Let's continue.
Southeast Archer 7198, 2 miles south of the AJ landfill, headed to Phoenix, last call. Headed to Stockville, last call, southeast. Southwest practice area, Oxford 5841, 2,100 over the I-10 Greenfields, ground drive, southwest.
cool. It just flew right over the top of us.
20 seconds.
Cool, 20 seconds to go.
I'll be doing a right 1 minute turn.
Yep, perfect.
There we go.
And on this one, for traffic's sake, I'm going to have you climb up to 4,700.
4,700.
Keep that climb coming.
So these right to 262, being down to branch 4,200, heading southeast. Getting set up for Fuelish, southeast tractors.
There you go.
Southeast tractor attack 9370 Romeo or area 51, heading north, setting up for the door 5 approach to the Fuelish, southeast.
20 more seconds in the turn.
Skyhawk 13 Yankee Papa descending 2,500 or ground reference maneuvers 10 miles southwest of Tampa VOR, southwest practice area.
All right, that one was perfectly 1 minute.
And there you are.
Oh, I'm losing it. Get back to, before you call it, let me get back to my altitude.
Redrock 60, maintain 4,700, pilot deviation.
4,700.
And how much more time do we have on this one?
I think it's over.
Done. All right, perfect. It's almost 8:40, so we probably have to head back.
Okay.
But we managed to get a we managed to get a pattern in, which is great. Next time, we'll just rip through the ground a little bit faster so we have some more time in the air, but that was fantastic, Bill. So now what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you go direct Chandler and descend down to 3,300.
All right, that's going to be a left turn.
Let's do a
4,800 over.
Let's do a left turn. Left turn heading direct Chandler.
All right,
descending to 3,300.
And my heading, shouldn't it tell me?
Direct track to be 023. Yep. When you come out up in your heading, you can get the weather for Falcon.
Okay, so I'd grab the ATIS for Falcon here, but notice the winds. It was blowing pretty good. So a funny little conversation happened between Eddie and me. Should he be worried? Maybe. I'll just let it play all the way back to the field. Here you go.
Back half, making Papa, 4454 Zulu. Winds at 30 at 12, gust 20. Temperature 12, dew point -5, altimeter 3025. Visual approach east. Landing at departing runways 4 left and 4 right. 5G not observed effect for further information, contact flight service. All arrivals contact tower 124.6.
Papa.
Advise this contact, you have Papa.
Cool.
I wanted to hear the winds one more time.
Sure.
Sounds like it's gusting pretty good.
Yeah,
Back
it's
half, making
gusting
Papa,
20.
1454 Zulu. Winds at 30 at 12, gust 20. Temperature 12, dew point -5, altimeter 3025.
I can take the landing if you're not comfortable with it.
It's pretty much down the runway.
Practice area.
I think we're okay.
All right.
You can be on it with me in case you're worried.
Okay.
5,000.
But I could use the practice.
I'm not that worried. I'm slightly worried, but... All right, you got 1,000 feet to descend.
Tractor 1010 6000, Mr. Volcano, simulated emergency descent, force landing, look up at the southeast.
South practice area, Red Rock 60s, 2 miles to the west of Pop Chule, 4,000 descending, 3,300 north back to Falcon, southeast.
Southeast practice area, Red Rock 71, 2 miles south of Adrian Landfill, 3,400.
Okay, so looks like he's going by. That's a good deal. I hope he's not heading back too.
Southeast practice area, Oxford 6154, about 5 miles to west of Maricopa Town.
All right, you can come right, heading, let's say 050.
050.
050 and keep that descent coming. All right. We're going to keep the speed up to try to get ahead of this Oxford, so you can honestly almost go full power.
Okay. All right, 130, man.
All right, good. Yeah, I just want to get some separation between this guy. Just for safety, but good job.
Started right here at 2791, 4000, Johnson ran going southbound 30.
He was coming kind of right at us, same altitude. He's also heading back to Falcon, so. Alright, you can pull that power back now. You can go down to like 2300, we're fine now. Sending way below for some reason, so maybe he's just going to transition through Chandler or do some landings there or something. I don't know. Help you out a little bit. There we go. Just clear of that Bravo, clear of this shelf. We'll just go right in the middle.
Got it. I want to look out so bad and like see where Chandler is.
Yeah, I know. Take a quick peek for a second, but.
Tanked.
Looks like there's some wind pushing it kind of maybe to the left a little bit, so really just kind of go kind of towards the middle. You don't even have to follow this line, just kind of put us right in the center.
Got it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe like a 045 heading almost. 040, 045.
Southwest Vector, Oxford 6154, we're about 2 miles northwest of Vancouver Town, simulate engine failure, 284 landing. Southwest.
Yeah, come right, 045 for now.
045, got it.
And you're 10 miles, so you can switch over to a tower.
Morning, helicopter. The 8 filter ramp, like to reposition to the Echo ramp for the Yankee 2 with Papa. MD8, Yankee 2 approved. MD8.
And you can say, Falcon Tower, Red Rock 60 is 10 miles to the south, inbound, full stop with Papa.
Falcon Tower, Red Rock 60 is 10 miles to the south, inbound with Papa, full stop.
This is 9774, Fall Cherokee, on a mile final, runway 4 left, go to land. 4 left, go to land, number 2, 9774. Red Rock 60, Falcon Tower, straight in, runway 4 right.
Straight in for 4 right, Red Rock 60.
Beautiful, Bill. Nice job. All right, we're clear of that traffic over there.
Say the call sign one more time.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Actually, 345, no delay, runway 4 right, go take off.
Just kind of sandwiching. It's not fun, kind of dodging the airspace, but you get used to it after a while.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
It's not really ideal, just threading between airspaces, but after a while you get used to it.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we're past Chandler's airspace, you can descend and maintain 2,400 traffic pattern altitude.
2,400.
2,400. We want to be, by the time we hit that airspace for Falcon, we want to be at 2,400. So you can continue with your before landing checklist, because we made that first call.
All right. Before landing, fuel pump on. Got to do a scan between each item.
I know.
Fuel, proper tank, I think we're still good.
Yep.
Mixture rich, we're still rich. Carb heat is in. Okay. Landing light.
Other one. There you go.
And 5 miles out. And
that's for untowered. They said straight in 4 right.
Yep.
Oh.
Now, 1 Bravo Yankee, can you make the
when
right
we go
turn?
below 2,700, we're gonna turn left, heading 360.
Roger 1 Bravo Yankee, Roger. Make the right turn on Delta.
360.
4 yep. Delta 2.
Hey, Delta 2 holding short at 4 right, 1 Bravo Yankee.
Red Rock 71, right, Delta 6, contact ground, see you.
Delta 6 off the ground, 71, see you.
Ox 2781, runway 4 right, full length, line up and wait.
Line up and wait, Delta 4, 2781.
Rocket 1 Bravo Yankee, runway 4 right at Delta 2, clear for takeoff, flight straight out.
Okay, Rocket 1 Bravo Yankee, clear for takeoff, straight out.
That should even out, yeah, for acceleration there, perfect.
And Falcon Tower, so 3966.
Yeah,
could we get a short approach on this one?
3966, make short approach, runway 4 left, clear to option.
Short approach, 4 left, clear for the option, thank you. Oxford, 3966.
Red Rock 60, runway 4 right, continue traffic in position.
Continue.
we're continuing Red Rock 60.
Perfect.
Falcon Tower, Oxford 9750, requesting On arrival with information, Papa.
Tell me when I can see again.
98774, left turn Echo 4, runway 4 left via
I
Echo.
was just thinking about that.
Left turn Echo 4, 4 left via Echo 98774.
Max 2781, runway 4 right, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 4 right, up for 2781.
You can slowly start your descent down to 2000.
Runway 48.
Start the descent?
Yeah, you can slowly start your descent down to 2000.
Okay.
Once you hit 2000, you can take your foggles off.
Rocket 1 Bravo Yankee, right turn approved.
Right turn 1 Bravo Yankee, then.
Rocket Tower, Oxford 58542, holding short of 4 right, requesting short delay.
Max 5542, Falcon Tower, delay approved, runway 4 right, clear for takeoff.
Delay approved, 4 right. Clear for takeoff, Oxford 5542.
Max 9750, reduced speed, found Cherokee 12 o'clock, 2 miles, runway 4 right, clear to land.
Reduced speed, 4 right, clear to land.
You can take your foggles off.
50.
Red Rock 60, runway 4 right, clear to land.
Clear to land, 4 right, Red Rock 60.
All right,
Rocket 1 Bravo
just do a
Yankee,
normal
traffic.
Welcome back.
Right in 1 mile, 3,400 eastbound Cherokee.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and put... You hold that, please. Thank you.
Rocket 1 Bravo Yankee, roger. For exchange proofs, deal.
Okay, did well, thanks. MD8 ready to go, Yankee 2.
MD8, Yankee 2 approved.
MD8.
Still low, watch your altitude.
Should be about 1,800, right?
1302 Charlie, 10 miles east, northeast, 3,600 landing, pop-up.
90.
November 1302 Charlie, Falcon Tower, make right traffic, runway 48.
Right traffic to 4 right, Columbia 02 Charlie.
You don't need to add
Out
any
of
flaps
80. Yeah.
if you're a little low. You can always add power.
Only
on
got
your
the one
final
in.
leg. Yep.
With the gusting, it's probably better not to go full flap.
No, probably not. So let's just stay at 25. We're clear to land.
Rocket Run 1 Bravo Yankee, if you still on me, additional traffic, 12 o'clock, 1 mile, 3,600 eastbound Cherokee.
Yep.
Yes, sir, thank you. Have them, and where we're going to pass behind them is right.
Keep the flap settings where it's at,
traffic,
right?
6 o'clock is a rocket, 3,200.
You can go flap 25 if absolutely need be, but right now it seems like this is doing us fine.
Yeah.
You're still a little low, so you don't need to add another set of flaps.
That's what I would decide too. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
3966, roger, left traffic.
Left 3966, and then can we try that short approach again?
Right, I got one white.
Short approach, runway 4 left, cleared option.
Short approach, 4 left, clear for the option, Oxford 3966, thank you.
Tower 98774. 4
set, approach stable, clear to land, 4 right.
So 9774 left traffic, runway 4 left, clear for takeoff.
4 left, clear for takeoff, 98774.
Perfect.
Still got one
You're about to
white,
get another
almost
white.
two.
Yeah,
There's
02
two.
Charlie, climb to 3,500, I'll call your descent.
I'm in 3,500, 02 Charlie.
And make sure to not land with brakes.
Oxford
Get
2781.
directional control, then add rudder, and then brakes.
Stopper, divide Oxford 2781.
A little high.
Oxford 5542, continue flying straight out.
Fly straight out, Oxford 5542.
I'll get on the controls with you lightly.
Columbia 02 Charlie, traffic 12 o'clock and 1 mile southeastbound 2,900 Cherokee.
Looking 02 Charlie.
We're gonna let that airspeed bleed off. Beautiful. Perfect.
Red Rock 60, right Delta 6, contact ground, see you later.
Right on Delta 6, and we'll contact ground, Red Rock 60.
Columbia 02 Charlie, Archer's 11 o'clock, go factor, descend to TPA.
Oh, it's all this
Descending 02 Charlie.
plants on the runway.
Bunch of crap out here.
Approved.
AJ approved 5542.
Right.
Columbia 02 Charlie, runway 4 right, go to land, number 1.
Clear on clear 4 right, 02 Charlie, number 1.
And come to a stop after that.
Will
Salt
do.
line. Yep.
Clear, clear.
Near Delta 6.
Docking ground, Red Rock 60s, off of 4 right at Delta 6. Go into parking.
Red Rock 65 ground, takes parking via Delta.
Taxi to parking via Delta, Red Rock 60.
Nicely done.
That's my fuel timer going on.
I'm glad you didn't switch it when we're that low to the ground in case something were to go wrong.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
with you?
we'll just go. Yeah, we'll just go right next to 66 Juliet.
Husky 433 Charlie Bravo, passing ground runway 48, taxi feet Delta.
Taxi feet Delta 4 right, 3 Charlie Papa, thank you.
And we'll just line ourselves up with those wings, and we'll do our after landing checklist, and then we'll do our parking secure checklist.
Okay.
Yeah, 1,000's fine.
After landing, flaps, I already got those. Fuel pump off. Landing light off. RP still in.
20,000 ground, Warrior.
Pulling that anyway, but
Zero, Papa.
I'm going to do a parking secure. There you go.
Quebec, North departure.
parking brake is on. Mixture cutoff.
Hold on, wait till
I will.
yeah.
I will.
We're 70 Papa 5 ground.
All right, magnetos are off.
Okay, so pretty good flight. I was learning, making some mistakes, and had a lot of mistakes to learn from yet to come. I was able to land okay in the gusts, although it wasn't too far off the runway heading, so it wasn't too hard. But I was happy to be getting experiences that would continue to make me a better pilot. I was having a lot of fun with Eddie, and I was just so happy to be flying again, even though I could barely look outside anymore. So let me know what you think. Am I going to make it through this? All right, it's time for today's Beyond the Checkride. Let's bring Kent back into the SPC studios and see what he has for us today. All right, I'm back with Kent Shook for another Beyond the Checkride. Kent, how are you doing?
Excellent as usual. I'm always happy when I get to talk about airplanes.
And what topic do you have for us today?
Well, this one's important because it is one of the top 3 causes of accidents that I think have been the top 3 for a really, really, really long time. Those 3 things, of course, are flying into weather you're not prepared for. You are the airplane. Quote, maneuvering flight, which means, you know, buzzing your buddy's house because you think it's cool and then crashing into power lines or something like that. Or, you know what the third one is. What is it?
Fuel problems.
Absolutely. For some silly reason, we cannot stop running out of gas. It's, in my opinion, the dumbest reason to crash an airplane because, you know, there are so many ways of being prepared and having lots and lots of fuel. You know, personally, I want an hour minimum, even if it's on a clear, beautiful VFR day. I think I recently told you the story about how I was flying an airplane that had more than a 7-hour endurance, and it had been flown for 45 minutes before I flew it. And I decided to have it topped off anyway, and after I flew, I was really glad I had. So, yeah, I mean, there's a reason that the saying goes, the only time you can have too much fuel is when you're on fire.
Right.
And one thing that I think would help that a lot is I always wonder, you know, if someone's flying home from a GA vacation, you know, and it's getting kind of late Sunday night and all the FBOs are closed and their fuel's getting kind of marginal. How many people have crashed because they just went, hell, I don't really know how to fuel my own airplane and I'm probably going to be okay and I just want to get home. I'm tired and, you know, so they push it and then run out of gas. You know, how much does that happen? If you look in the NTSB reports, there are so many of these running out of fuel accidents that just make you face palm and say, what were you thinking? And I really just think in many cases it's because people have never fueled an airplane themselves, and it's not something that's taught to most people during primary training unless they're at one of the airports that maybe doesn't have fuel trucks and it's their flight school's standard that, you know, they fuel the airplane as soon as they're done flying. But other than that one limited circumstance, I think most people get a private pilot certificate and have no clue how to fuel an airplane.
I agree. I hadn't ever fueled an airplane when I got my private certificate, and I didn't learn it until I joined the club. We had to fill all of our own airplanes. Even at our home airport, there was only self-serve there because I started flying out of a small private airport. And, you know, it's so wonky to me that you can be a pilot. And I didn't think about it at the time, but I thought about it afterwards when I thought, man, I don't know how to fuel my own airplane. But it seems really strange that you can be a pilot and not ever have been taught how to fuel an airplane. But I think, like you said, I think a lot of people are in that boat. So I think this is a great topic.
Yeah, I would guess it's probably the vast majority of people, until you get to the point where you're flying into little rural places a lot, or, you know, maybe you get into backcountry flying or something like that. There's probably a lot of people who make it all the way to the airlines without ever having fueled an airplane. So,
that's probably true, yeah. Yep.
Anyway, so let's kind of talk through the whole process. I mean, I don't know how many FBOs there are in the world, but I do know that airports that have an FBO are in the minority. There are so many places out there where, you know, you stop at Podunk Municipal and you can stop and you can fuel up your own airplane. So let's talk about how you do that. First of all, of course, you want to pull up to the pump. My preferred method of doing it is to put the left wing closer to the pump. It's just so that I can taxi back out when I go to leave, because I fly a really heavy airplane. It's kind of hard to push back. If you're flying something lighter, like a 152, 172, something like that you can push pretty easily, then it's okay to just go ahead and pull straight up to the pump.
Yeah.
And this is a scenario where...
I've always done that too.
Okay, yeah, this is a scenario where I think using the parking brake is usually an easy way to go. That way you don't have to worry about chocks once you get out. But yeah, park the airplane in a good spot. You basically want to be able to easily pull the fuel hose out in front of the airplane. So when I'm in the Mooney, like I said, I kind of point my left wing toward where the pumps are, but I want the pump to be kind of at a 45-degree angle to the front and left of me, out past the wingtip. And that way, if I pull the fuel hose straight out, I'm going in front of the nose. I'm not, you know, getting into the prop or anything like that. I'm not trying to pull it around my nose gear or any of that sort of thing. So park it in a good position like that, shut down, turn that parking brake on, hop out, and then, of course, you got to pay. I think there's only about 3 or maybe 4 different types of payment terminals at all the airports in the U.S. For some reason, I can't think of what any of them are called right now, but they're all fairly straightforward.
Yeah, the payment terminal you should be able to operate, but the fuel pumps are different than most people are.
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
Used to with cars, so yeah.
Now, one thing to be aware of is that some airports will have a timeout in between when you make your payment and when you start the pump. So one thing that I've seen a lot of people do is to pull out the fuel hose first before you do the payment terminal. And that way, as soon as you're done with your payment, you can go straight to the switch that turns the pump on and turn it right on so that you don't get that timeout. I will say I often don't do that, but there have been times where that's bitten me and I've had to go through the whole credit card procedure a second time because the pump had a really short timeout and I didn't get the hose out quick enough. So just something to be aware of. The other thing is, on all of those payment terminals, they're at some point going to ask you, is the aircraft grounded? So this isn't your car. You're not buying 10 gallons of fuel, most likely. In fact, one bonus to being able to fuel your own airplane is that you don't have to buy your fuel from an expensive FBO. You know, I'm based at a field that has Atlantic Aviation, and they are not cheap. So I can save like $1.50, $2 a gallon, and my fuel capacity is 90 gallons. And so sometimes I'm going and buying 75 or 80 gallons at a time. And at $2 a gallon, that's real money. So that flight to the little airport that has the cheap fuel pays for itself. If you needed any more incentive to listen to the rest of this segment, there it is. This can save you a whole lot of money.
Or better yet, get you a little extra flying for no more money.
Exactly.
How about that?
I mean, that's how I look at it. Hey, I get to have a nice little flight basically for free. And you know, that's not to say that you shouldn't support your local FBO, but I don't think Atlantic Aviation is going to miss my money when they're fueling Gulfstreams and Falcons and such. In fact, I'm probably more of an inconvenience to them, if anything, at that point.
Yeah, we're a nuisance to operations like that.
So, yeah, you know, if you have a great little mom and pop FBO at your home airport and, you know, they're probably not charging Atlantic or Signature kind of money either, you know, definitely go ahead and support them when you can. Anyway, let's see, where were we? Grounding your airplane. You're going to be most likely pumping a fair amount of fuel. You may have just been flying, and both of those things cause a lot of static electricity buildup. Chances are, you know, the electrical potential of the airplane is not going to be the same as the pump. And so that's why there's always that bonding strap. It's usually a wire that's on a little retractable spool that you just pull out, and you want to attach it to a part of the airplane that is not painted.
It's got a big alligator clip, basically, on the end.
Right.
You just, yeah, it's clamp. It's spring-loaded, and you just clamp it onto.
And it's worth looking in the manual for your airplane to see if there is a specified grounding point on the airplane. You know, kind of the conventional wisdom is just something unpainted. So a lot of FBOs I know will just attach it to the bolt on the nose gear that's not painted or something like that. Or I generally clamp mine onto the exhaust of the airplane. But, for example, on a lot of composite airplanes, you know, that airplane is not all conductive the way a metal airplane would be. And so I don't know where you do it on a Cirrus, to be honest, but on a Diamond Star, there is a specific grounding point on the underside of the wing. It almost looks like a spark plug coming out the bottom of the wing. And that's what you're supposed to clip it to. Because if you clip it to the exhaust on a Diamond Star, there is no electrical path between the exhaust and the tanks at all. So just be aware of that, and especially if you're not on a metal airplane, make sure that you're grounding the airplane at the specified point. And that's just to avoid having any sparks flying in the vicinity of the fuel when you go to fuel up. The other thing you want to do is, when you are fueling, keep the filler against the filler neck of the airplane, so you have another path there for that electricity to go. But really the final thing in terms of not creating any sparks is, when you're done, don't tap against the airplane to knock that last little drip off, because you know, pulling it off and putting it back on, you're just creating another opportunity for a spark. So keep it in contact with the airplane until you're done with that tank, and then just pull it right off and don't touch it again. So at this point, you should have your ground strap attached to the proper point on your airplane. You've got your fuel hose pulled out, and now it's really pretty simple. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let's talk about those payment terminals again. One of the questions it's going to ask you is for the tail number of your airplane. And I know some people who I would bet are not putting the tail number of their airplane. They're putting some random thing in there. But the reason you do want to put the tail number of your airplane in there is, you know, let's say you run out of fuel, you come up short. Maybe it wasn't even your fault. Maybe you had plenty of fuel, but, you know, maybe a fuel cap was loosed and you were siphoning some fuel overboard in flight, and for whatever reason you ran out of fuel. That's how you can prove that, yes, I really did have more fuel aboard. Is, you know, they're going to be able to go back and say, oh, yes, November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, put on 80 gallons at Podunk Municipal on their way here. And in the unfortunate event you don't make it, that's how the NTSB is going to be able to piece together whether it was some sort of a mechanical thing where, you know, there was a fuel cap failure, or whether they just say, well, there goes another stupid pilot who didn't fuel up their airplane. So please do go ahead and actually put your tail number in there so that, you know, the FAA and the NTSB can definitively say, okay, yeah, that person fueled up their airplane. Side note, I bet November 12345 is the most commonly fueled airplane out there, just for those people who don't want to put their own tail number in. So you've paid for your fuel, you've got your plane grounded, you've got your hose out to the plane, you've got your fuel pump turned on. That can happen in different ways as well.
Do you yet?
You should.
There you go. I was going to say.
You will.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the next thing you should cover, because people aren't used to turning on the fuel pump after they've paid.
Yeah, one thing people don't realize is when you're fueling your car, a lot of the pumps will still have the thing where you lift the handle and you have to flip that little thing up. Mm-hmm. That's what you're doing. At most airports, I would say the most common variety I see is that there's a little switch that can rock up and down inside the fuel cabinet, and it's often next to a light switch that's the same style that will light up the inside of the cabinet if you're fueling at night. It's usually close to the flow meter.
That's going to tell you how many gallons.
Right.
That's the way I see it usually around here anyway, is it's somewhere around, you're going to see usually an analog flow meter that's going to, there's a reset button. I don't know if you were going to get to that, but lets you zero that out. Usually the on-off switch is somewhere close to that.
Yeah, I would agree. And you just made another great point. Those analog meters need to be reset before you start pumping fuel. I would say most commonly there is a thing on the right-hand side that you just turn so the top is going front to back, and that'll roll all the numbers down to 0, and then you let go, and you'll be able to tell how much fuel you're pumping.
They're still counting how much fuel you're pumping, so you're going to pay for it either way. But if you want to know how much you're pumping, it'd be a good idea to zero that out.
Yes. For sure. It's not going to affect the payment at all, like you said. That's just a tool that's there for you to know how much you put in. Okay, so the other thing that I have seen is there are airports that have taken old school automotive fuel pumps and kind of done some hardware hacking to them to make them into aircraft fuel pumps. And so you may
I have not run across that. That is pretty funny.
Yeah, you may actually need to lift that little thing that would have been where the pump handle used to be, but since aircraft pump handles are not the same shape, they won't fit in there. So there's usually some other place where the pump handle goes. Yeah, you'll see all kinds of things that have been hacked together at small airports. Everybody's making use of the resources that they have available. So just be aware that, there is quite a bit of variation out there. But yeah, I would say by far the most common is that one that's inside the cabinet, real close to the analog meter numbers. And that's probably slightly into the majority of small airport self-serve pumps that I've seen. So, are we ready to pump fuel yet? Try and keep the rest of the mechanism and the hose and everything from touching the airplane. Even if it's your airplane and you're paying for the next paint job, there's no reason to rush that. If you're on a high-wing airplane, now you're probably up on a ladder. So the easiest way to handle that is to have the fuel hose coming over your shoulder. And that way it's not going to make contact with the airplane at all.
And by the way, I don't know about most, many places where you get self-serve fuel will have a ladder laying there. So
I would say pretty much everybody does. I have never been to a place that had self-serve fuel that didn't have a ladder. Or
I haven't either, but I haven't been to most places, so I didn't want to overspeak.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was flying the 182 around all over the place, I was fueling that myself, and that is one thing that, like I said, I've never run into a place that didn't have a ladder, because they would be excluding the entire high-wing segment of the market. Speaking of Cessnas, we recently talked about securing your airplane post-flight and how you need to move the fuel selector off of the both position. Same thing happens here. If you leave your fuel selector on both, the fuel will start draining from one wing into the other almost immediately when you start filling up one side. And so several gallons can move across. At least this is what I found on the 182, is you'd have several gallons move across from one side to the other if you fueled it with the fuel selector in both. And then you get on the other side and you fill it up, and well, then you're not actually filled up anymore, because some of your fuel drained across when you were fueling the first tank, and so you got some air in that tank now. So make sure you put the fuel selector on left or right before you fuel up on a Cessna or anything else that has interconnects between tanks like that. Just make sure you know your fuel system and make sure you're putting your fuel in the place you want it. But yeah, most planes you're going to be fueling up one wing and then moving and fueling up the other one. I pretty much always fuel up the wing that's farther from the pump first, just so that I don't have to pull more fuel hose out in between. You know, if you're on a high wing, you're going to need to move your ladder in between tanks and that sort of thing as well. But once you're done, you know, if you got that high wing, go ahead and put the ladder away. But the next thing you want to do is turn the pump off. So go and find that switch wherever you found it, turn the pump off, and you'll hear the pump stop, and you'll probably, if you're close enough to that payment terminal, you'll hear a receipt start to print. Get everything all buttoned up, make sure your fuel caps are on securely, and I actually don't know what the name for the style of fuel caps I have is, but it's the flush variety. Those don't have to be too far off of level with the top of the wing before they can start leaking fuel. I would say it's probably 10 degrees or less, and it's fairly easy to do that. I know that with the TBMs, we always had to double check that line people had put those back on straight, and I know on the Mooney once I have had the experience of accidentally doing that and not noticing it myself, and then shortly after takeoff I go to well, I don't know, for whatever reason I was looking out at the left wing and I noticed this stream. It almost looked like smoke, but it was just white, and I thought, oh, that's cool, except for that's not water vapor, that's fuel that I'm leaking. So had to turn around and go right back into the airport again and get that fuel cap on there straight. So that's a good thing to double check. Once you've got the plane all buttoned back up, you're going to need to retract the fuel hose and that grounding strap. Most of the time, I would say you'll have an electric motor on the fuel hose system. There are some that are manual, and they're kind of a pain. Yes. So one trick that I learned that I like to leave everything ready to go for the next pilot. And if you don't have somebody there to help you getting that fuel hose back onto the reel, it could be difficult to get it evenly wound up across the full width of the reel. And so one thing that I generally do is I use my foot, just like the arch of your foot, up against the fuel pump as you're pushing the button to retract the fuel hose. And you can use your foot to kind of push it left and right as it's rolling itself back up, and make sure that you don't get to the point where the entire fuel hose is all on one side of the reel and starts getting bound up. And one thing that some airports have on those fuel hose reels is a clutch that you may have to engage or disengage to be able to pull the fuel hose out easily, and then you might have to re-engage a clutch to get that motor to pull on the reel again. So just be aware of that. That's usually a big black handle that'll be on the side of the reel. Not super common, but it's not exactly rare either. So we've got our fuel hose in. Next thing is that grounding cable. Usually with those, if they have the automatic retraction, you can just give it a little tug and it'll start to retract that on its own. Don't just let go of it.
Spring mechanism.
Yes, and don't just let go of it, because then they zip in really quick and you make the airport managers mad because it only takes a few times of that happening before that alligator clip is just destroyed from dragging along the ground on its way back in, but then it also hits the stop inside the cabinet suddenly and gets ripped off the cable and, you know, messes up that spring mechanism. So take a hold of that alligator clip securely, then give it a tug and walk it in.
Yep.
Might want to grab your receipt. However, you do want to be sure you sump the new fuel, because who knows if there's a leak in the tank at that little airport or something. Maybe there's a big rainstorm and now their tank is full of water and you just pumped it into your airplane. So definitely be diligent about checking the fuel and making sure that there's no water or sediment in it.
Make sure it's the right color.
Yes, all that stuff that you do on a pre-flight, make sure you do that every time you fuel. In the event that you're done flying for the day and it's going to be, you know, you're parking the plane for the night, if it is really cold when you're filling the plane, don't top it off every last little bit, because next morning the sun comes out and it starts to warm up and that fuel's going to expand and it's going to start draining out all over the ramp and wasting your money. So leave a little room in there if it's really cold when you're fueling. As far as how to find fuel, how do you decide where you want to fuel, Bill?
You know, I use ForeFlight. One of the layers on the map allows you to turn on fuel. I know they get their data from other places, and they also allow pilots to update those fuel amounts right in ForeFlight. And there are other places I could look for it, but lately I don't really do that anymore. I just look at ForeFlight. ForeFlight even color codes them. So, you know, if it's green, it means it's one of the cheaper fuels in the area. If it's yellow, it's kind of a mid-price fuel. And if it's red, it's one of the most expensive airports to get fuel. You could be flying along and just check along your route and just look for the cheapest ones. So that's what I do.
Okay. Yeah, I pretty much do the same, although I also will still check airnav.com because there's enough people still flying out there that don't use ForeFlight and usually complain on the internet about people who do use ForeFlight. And so they're generally still using AirNav, AirNav has been around for a long time. I mean, I've been flying for more than 20 years, and it was there right at the beginning. Probably I would guess the first site that had fuel prices, but the thing that I use there is what they call great deals reports, and that will it shows you what the criteria are for getting on that report, but I think you have to be like the lowest within 50 miles or something like that, and then they have they have some that are highlighted as super deals that have to be like the cheapest within 150 miles. And so there are times where I'll find something on there that hasn't been updated in ForeFlight, but that's pretty rare. It's just kind of another method of looking a little farther and a little wider for cheap fuel, because one drawback to using ForeFlight is if you zoom out too far, you won't be able to see all the prices.
That's true.
And so you might be hiding a good price. And so I do, when I'm using ForeFlight, I keep it fairly zoomed in. And if you're going on a 1,500 mile trip, you can go 100 or 200 miles off course in the middle of that trip, and you're only affecting your total trip distance by like 10 miles. And so some of those really long trips are where those AirNav great deals reports can help you find something that might not be right on your path, but might be worth stopping at anyway.
Those are awesome tips, Kent, for refueling the airplane. And I think, like we said at the beginning, I think there's a lot of people that have just never had experience doing that. So really appreciate you kind of walking through all those details. And I hope it helps somebody out there when they get beyond the check ride.
For sure. And, if nothing else, I think the best thing to do is to go and do this before you have to. Don't wait until you're on the way home from vacation Sunday night and have to figure out a new thing, because that's where that get-there-itis is going to set in. now that you've heard this, go out and try it for yourself, and you'll find out it really is not that big of a deal. It's an easy thing to do. It can save you a ton of money. So go out there, fuel your plane.
That's a great point.
Fly safe and have fun.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kent. And until next time, we'll see ya.
See ya.
I hope you enjoyed the flight and the latest Beyond the Checkride. I want to thank Kent for his help on these segments. He's got a lot of GA experience, so his insights are really valuable, and I hope you're finding them valuable too. Again, we'd love ideas on what we should cover in those segments. We've already thought of things that we should have put in our first one last week. We'll probably think of some this week and going into the future. So we'll probably redo topics again at some point. But in the meantime, like I said, we'd love to hear from you on what you think we should do, or if you have ideas about what we should do, or if we've forgotten anything that we should add in or correct. So send your thoughts and feedback to me at bill@studentpilotcast.com. You can also reach out to me on X with the handle BillWill. That's Bravo India Lima Lima Whiskey India Lima. And as usual, we'd love to hear from you, so keep the suggestions and the comments coming. Like I said, I was loving this. I had a lot of hard work and study ahead of me, which I had already started. I was preparing for the written and eventually would be preparing for my check ride, and of course, learning and trying to understand what this instrument flying thing was all about. I had purchased and watched the instrument course from Sporties, but I was also getting my feet wet with Shepherd Air, which I'll definitely talk about in a future episode as I got ready to take the written. Those programs at Shepherd Air would prove invaluable as I've been progressing in my certs and ratings, so I'll cover that soon. For now, I was flying and I was trying to get sharper with my skills. It's a lot, but I knew it'd be worth it. It seemed far away, but looking back, it would be just a blink of an eye and I'd be sitting in front of the DPE.
The music for today's episode is To Be an Angel by the Canadian band Uncle Seth. You can get more information and subscribe to the podcast feeds on the web at studentpilotcast.com. Remember, any instruction that you hear in this podcast was meant for me and for me alone in the situation I was in at the time. Please do not try to blindly apply anything you see or hear in this podcast to your own flying without thinking it through on your own completely. If you have questions about any aspect of your flying, please consult a qualified CFI.